Much like the first game on this test, this is a sequencing game, an ordering game. We care about the order in which things appear from left to right. And we'll talk about the similarities and the differences between this game and the first game. Let's take a look at this. A cruise line is scheduling 7 week-long voyages for the ship Freedom. Okay, each voyage will occur in exactly one of the first 7 weeks of the season, 1 through 7. Each voyage will be to exactly one of 4 destinations, GJMT. So let's write that, GJMT. We'll underline it. And there are 7 slots, so why don't I write that out? Each destination scheduled for at least one of the weeks. Following conditions apply. Okay, so one big difference between this game and the first game is that here we have 4 items, but 7 slots to fill. So some of these are going to have to, at least one of them is going to have to appear more than once. In game 1, we had 5 items, 5 slots. Each item had to appear. In this game, yes, each item does have to appear. So GJMT, each of them does have to appear at least once, but at least one of them is going to appear more than once. All right, so now we'll go through the 3 major steps in really mastering a logic game. Step 1, write out the rules. Step 2, see if you can combine the rules in some way. And step 3, build out the diagram and make deductions, draw conclusions, things that must be true, that could be true, that could not be true. And sometimes step 3, you kind of mix in with step 1 and step 2. We'll see a little bit of that. So let's start with step 1. Write out the rules. All right, rule 1, J not in week 4. So I could write J not equal to 4. And it's a good idea to do that, but what we definitely want to do is put a rule in the diagram whenever you can. So I'm going to write J on top of 4 and write a minus sign. No J in the 4th slot. You could do that. Some people like to cross it out with a little slash. It's really a matter of personal preference. I don't like to do that because sometimes if you write the line real thick, it gets hard to read the letter that you crossed out. So I'm just going to stick with the minus sign. Okay, so that's rule 1. How about rule 2? T will be in week 7. So T equals 7, but we absolutely want to put that in the master sketch. I'm even going to write a box around it. T is absolutely always in slot 7. How about rule 3? Now this one's a little complicated, and it's really 2 rules. Freedom makes exactly 2 voyages to M, that's part 1, and part 2, at least 1 voyage to G in between the 2 M's. So why don't I write this, M dot 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 G dot 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 M. I could write the dot dot dot. I could also write it this way. I prefer to do it this way, but here again, a matter of personal preference. So the first part of this rule said M appears twice. So I'm even going to write M, I'm going to write M sub 2. You don't have to do that, but it might be helpful. And then the second part, at least 1 G in between the 2 M's. Now there could be more than 1 G. It could be 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 G's, who knows? But at least 1 G. So in theory, I could write, minimum 1 G. Of course, that's taking up a lot of room. But really, just what we've written here allows for more than 1 G. Doesn't say that there has to be only 1 G. It allows for more than 1 G. So there's really no need to write any more. And keep in mind, this does not necessarily mean M, G, M all right next to each other. It could mean that. That is a possibility. But there could be additional items in between the 2 M's as well. All right, that's rule 3. Rule 4, and this one is really important. G will be the destination in the week preceding, coming before any voyage to J. There are often rules that you want to turn into if-then statements. Usually an if-then statement will be written as an if-then statement, if this, then that. But sometimes you want to actually turn a statement into an if-then statement. I could rewrite this as if J, I could write an arrow to indicate then. If J, then, if there's a J, there is a G next to it, I could write a little arrow like that too. Now let's talk about this one for a minute. Suppose I have G up here. Does that mean that J has to appear to its right? It actually does not. And here's the way I like to think about rules like this. Suppose this is the mall, okay? Suppose this is the mall. And let's say J is little Jack. And let's say G is his mother, Gina. What Rule 4 essentially says is that if Jack is in the mall, Gina is also there and standing to his left. That's really what the rule says. Now, suppose that Gina is in the mall. Does this rule say that Jack is with her? No, it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that. Gina could be next to, who knows, could be next to T, could be next to M. If Gina's there, we don't know who's standing next to her. So really important to be comfortable with a rule like this. And finally, Rule 5. No destination scheduled for consecutive weeks. So why don't we do this? How about slot, put a box around it. I could cross it off. I could write the word no. You can't have 2 G's next to each other. You can't have 2 T's next to each other. So that's step 1. And just to give myself a little more room, let me erase this and rewrite it. Rule 4, I just want to fit this in a little bit better. So if J, then boom, boom, You see a J, there is a G on its left. Okay. And then rule 5 again, no consecutive letters. So that's step 1, write out the rules. And when you're done with it, ask, is there anyone who has not been talked about? Let's see. Rule 1, J has been talked about. J has been talked about. Rule 2, T has been talked about. Rule 3, M and G all talked about. Okay. No floaters. If there was an item that was not talked about, we would do this. We would put a circle around it so that we're always well aware that that item could go just about anywhere. All right, so that's step 1. How about step 2? Combine the rules. And sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, but that's fine. You always want to think about it. Rule 1 talks about J. Does anybody else talk about J? Yeah, rule 4 talks about J. Can we combine those? Well, not really. There's really no way to combine it, but that's fine. You just want to think about it. Rule 2 talks about T. Anybody else talk about T? No, although if we combine it with rule 5, we can make a little deduction. No consecutive letters, so T is not in slot 6. We'll put that in the diagram. How about rule 3? Talks about M, G, and M. Anybody else talk about M, G, or M? Okay, yes. Rule 4 seems to be our favorite rule. If you have a J, you have a G on its left. It would be tempting. It would be tempting to make a mistake and say, all right, then MGM, there's got to be a J. There's got to be a J in here, right? Not necessarily. Our JG, maybe it's over here on the right. Maybe it's over here on the left. So we don't know that. The JG isn't necessarily between the two M's. It may be, but not necessarily. Okay, so step 2, we're combining the rules, seeing if we can make a few deductions. We made a little one. We said T cannot be 6. Step 3, build out the diagram and continue to make deductions. Try to make deductions. Things that must be true, things that could be true, things that cannot be true. A great way to start on a sequencing game like this is to ask who could be first, who could be last. Well, we know who's last, so that's all taken care of. Now, who could be first? Could G be first? I see no problem with that. How about M? Well, I look at my MGM rule. So there's a G over here and another M over here. That seems like it could work. How about T? The only rule on T is this one. T doesn't seem to be restricted much at all. And then how about J? Oh, so the rule on J, if you see a J, there's a G to its left. Could you put a G to the left of J? No, why? Because then G would be in weak 0, and there is no weak 0. So another little deduction I can make is that there's no J in slot 1. So let's put that in here. No J in slot 1. Okay, other deductions we can make. When you see blocks in your rules, and I'll even write a block around this one, it's a good idea to ask, where could the blocks go? I mean, JG, could we have JG here? Yeah, that seems okay. How about here? That's fine. Now, how about here? 4, 3. No, why? Because J can't be 4th. So that's out. And let me get rid of that J I put in the first slot. Could JG go 3 and 2? Yep. Could it go 2 and 1? Yes. So nothing here suggests that I should create 2 or 3 broad scenarios, 2 or 3 states of the world, so to speak. In our master sketch, really not much to put here. I mean, I could write M followed by G somewhere, followed by M. Mental note, we have our JG block we're going to have to place, and then other items are going to have to go in there as well. We have 6 slots to fill. So that's really our master sketch. We'll underline it, put a nice thick underline underneath the master sketch. You don't want to touch it, don't want to tamper with it if you can possibly avoid it. Now, in a situation like this, where your master sketch just doesn't have a whole lot written in it, you probably wonder, what in the world am I going to do? Well, what they'll do is they will give you questions that give you details. Questions you can start off by filling in certain details that'll make the question a lot easier. So don't be discouraged if you see a diagram like this. Okay, so enough of that. Let's look at question 11. Which of the following is an acceptable schedule of destinations? The first question on a logic game, it's usually this one, the so-called acceptable situation question. Really, what it means is, which of these 5 choices does not violate any rules? So the way to tackle these questions is just go rule by rule and see what you can cross out. So I look at rule 1. J is not in week 4. So let's see. Answer A. Week 4 is Trinidad, so that's fine. Answer B, Martinique. C, Martinique. D, Jamaica. So D is out, so I will cross out D. And for our purposes, I'll even write that this was rule 1 that got rid of D. How about rule 2? T will be in week 7. A, B, C, D, all those are fine except for E, so E is gone. E violates rule 2. Rule 3, and we said this is really 2 rules. M appears twice and only twice, and there's at least one G in between them. So let's see. Answer A, M, G, M, that's fine. Answer B, M, T, M. Aha, B is out. How about, and that is rule 3. How about rule 4? G will be the destination in the week preceding any voyage to J. All right, so answer A, here's a J, G to its left, that's fine. But answer C, J is first. We said before, J cannot be first. So that's out. Rule 4 gets rid of that one, so the answer is A. Now, I recommend that you take 3 practice tests untimed. 3 of them untimed, and then about 10 timed. including the 4 free practice tests that you can get on the LSAT website. I recommend that in the untimed tests, certainly, and in, I would say, the first 5 timed tests, it's a really good idea to write out the answer to this acceptable situation question. So let's do that. Question 11. I'll write my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces. I'll bring the T down from the master sketch. GJMT, GJMT, GMT. So we'll do this, and then we'll look at the rules starting in the diagram, starting at the top of the diagram. So we made a deduction, T cannot be 6. Nope, T is not 6, so that's fine. We had a rule, J cannot be 4. Here, J is not 4, T is 4, so that is fine. We had a little deduction, J cannot be first, and no, J is not first, okay. Now I look inside the diagram, so to speak. T has to be 7, yep, we got that. And then underneath the diagram, M before G before M, yep, M before G before M, so that's all fine. Now we'll look over here on the rules in the column on the left, anything we didn't put in the diagram. Rule 1, taken care of. Rule 2, taken care of. Rule 3, the MGM, we talked about that. Rule 4, if J, then there's a G on the left. All right, I have a J in slot 2. I have a G in slot 1, so that is absolutely fine. And 5, no consecutive letters. G, J, M, T, G, M, T, no consecutive letters. So that is fine. By doing this, and it doesn't take very long, it just gives you an opportunity to review the rules. Make sure you've written them down correctly. That's really important. And just get more familiar with them. If you do that, it makes it easier to answer other questions. So I suggest you do that on 3 tests you take untimed and the first 5 that you take timed. Now, after taking 5 timed tests, you might say, hey, I don't need to do this anymore. I've got it. No problem. It's really different from person to person. All right, let's take a look at the next question. And by the way, how much time should you take to do what we did before we answered question 11, to set up the diagram, to write out the rules and then combine the rules and then build your diagram and draw conclusions? This is the 3rd game on the test. I recommend 3 minutes max, 2 to 3 minutes. After that, time to jump to the questions. So let's look at question 2. All right, now here we are not given any details at all. Which of the following cannot be true? Well, wait a minute, hold on. Maybe it's easy, maybe it's not. I recommend you come back and do these later, after you've answered questions that do give you some details, so that you'll see arrangements that are okay and that are not okay. So let's jump to question 3. Did I say question 3? Question 13. If freedom goes to Trinidad in week 5, which of the following could be true? So not must be, not cannot be, could be. But the great thing is we get a detail. So first, let's label the question. This is question 13. I'll write my 7 slots. We'll bring down a T from the master sketch. Trinidad in week 5. So this is the habit you want to get into. You place an item, you look at the rules on the item. Let's see, any rules on T? Well, we only had that little rule that T is 7th, but that's fine. It's always the first thing you want to do. You place an item and then you look at the rules on the item. If there were any rules on slot 6, you would also look at rules on slot 6. So T is 5th. All right, so who's left? Well, I said that blocks are really important. We definitely want to ask, where could this GJ block go? Well, of course, J could not be in 6, because then you couldn't put G next to it. J could not be in 4 because the rule says it can't be in 4. It could be in 3. J could be in 3 and G could be in 2 right next to it. Or, and let's write 7 more slots here, or J could be in 2 and G could be in 1. So what are we doing? We're sort of writing 2 little mini diagrams just for the purposes of this question. And just to remind you, this restriction here, T is in week 5, this isn't a new rule that applies to every question. It only applies to this one question. All right, so that's where we stand now. Now, we could continue to fill in some of the spaces. There's a little bit of a balancing act. Once you've filled in some of it, do you want to take more time to fill in the other slots, or do we have enough information now to answer the questions? Take a moment to go through the choices, see if there's at least anything we can eliminate, and if you see an answer that looks pretty good, try it out to make sure that it could be true. I'll just pause for a second. I always like to start at the bottom. Let's see. How about answer E? Could J be in week 6? Well, no, we talked about that. J cannot be in week 6. It has to have a G to its left. So E is out. E is out. Could you go to M in week 4? Well, let's see. How about here? I place an M. I look at the rules on M. We have this MGM we keep talking about. Okay, so an M could be in slot 1. We've got our G. We've got our J. We've got our second M. Who would go in the 6th slot? Well, G. G could go in there. So there you have it. We wrote out enough to be able to get to the correct answer pretty quickly. Answer D is in David. Let's look at question 14. If G is in week 1 and J is in week 5. All right, so 14, we'll label this as question 14. I'll write my 7 slots. Bring down the T from the master sketch. We put G in slot 1. We put J in slot 5. I place an item. I look at the rules on the item. I place a J. What are the rules on J? Well, we know this very well by now. J has a G on its left. So I'll put a G here. All right, I have now placed 2 G's. So what do? I look at the rules on G. Rule 3 talks about G. I'll pause for a moment, apply that rule, and see what you can fill in here. This is a must be true. There are some things that could be true, but there's something that definitely must be true. I'll pause for just a second. We have to have our MGM down here somewhere. That means you're going to have an M in slot 6. And that is, in fact, the answer to the question. Answer E is an echo. The first M, it could be in slot 2, or it could be in slot 3. And then what would the other letter be? Well, it would have to be a T. So slot 2, it's either M or T. Slot 3, it's either T or M. Those are things that could be true, but this is a must be true question. What must be true? M is in slot 6. Okay, question 15. G in week 1, T in week 2. So we'll write 15, 1 through 7. Bring the T down. G in 1, okay. T in 2, okay. I place an item. I look at the rules on the item. T, well, we don't know much about T. We've said that before. Now G, 2 rules on G. We have our MGM. So in here, these 4 slots, only 4 slots. We've got our M, G, M. And then we've got rule 4 as well. That also talks about G. I'll pause for a second, figure out who goes in those 4 slots in which order, and then take a look at the choices. We have only 4 slots here. MGM, well, those are 3 letters. We have to place a J somewhere. In this case, the J is going to have to come in between the 2 M's. So it's going to have to be an M in slot 3, an M over here in slot 6, and then our J, G in here. Not surprisingly, this is a must be true. We know where everybody goes. And the answer is what? The answer is A, M in week 3. And what you see we're doing here, we have now seen many examples of arrangements that are okay. And a lot of the time, this will make it easier to answer other questions. Let's look at 16. More details. We love this. If freedom goes to M in week 3, so question 16, bring down the T, place the M in week 3. I place an item. I look at the rules on the item, and we have our MGM rule. So what do I want to write here? Well, the first M, it could be in slot 1, and then you'd have a G in slot 2. So we just want to write out a little bit. But then again, we'll write a little mini diagram underneath this. Another possibility is the first M is here, and then the second M, we have our M, G, M down here somewhere. So we may have written enough. Go ahead and look at the choices, and I always recommend starting from the bottom. It turns out there are 4 choices you can get rid of pretty quickly, and process of elimination is a big help on this test. So just take a moment and give that a try. I'm going to switch colors here. Let's see, answer E. Could you have TM? TM, TM. Well, what's the problem? There would be no G in between the 2 M's, so that's out. How about D, TJ? Well, I already know that's a problem because the rule says J has to have a G on its left, so that's automatically out. We don't even have to think much about that. How about C, MT? Well, that's not going to work either because then you would have 2 M's next to each other. How about answer B, JG? Well, wait a minute. If I put a J in the 4th slot, if I put a J in the 4th slot, that violates our JG rule. You have to have a G on the left, so that's out. So it's got to be A. Process of elimination, a big help here, has to be A. And could you do this? Let's look down here. If I put a G here and a T here, all right, I look at what I have below. So M would be here in 6. That's fine. Who's left? Yeah, our JG goes over here in slots 1 and 2. Answer A. All right, 17. Here we have absolutely no details. Hopefully, though, we're better off for having done questions that give us a lot of examples of what's okay, what's not okay. So give this a shot. I always recommend starting from the bottom and then going up. Now, before you do, I just want to make one quick point. Suppose I look at answer A. Freedom goes to G in either week 1 or week 2. Is that a must be true? Does that always have to be true? Well, I've run out of room here. I can't write our answers to every single question, or I should say what we wrote out next to every single question. But in the previous questions, we pretty much saw a G in either slot 1 or slot 2 in each of those answer choices. What I would recommend is just put like a little tilde. Put a little tilde next to this one. You don't want to dwell. You don't want to stop and think, wow, okay, it seems like it's been true, but can I prove it? This is a maybe. We'll hold on to it. Look at the other choices. If it looks like a maybe, fine, put a tilde by it. Keep going and see if one answer really jumps out at you. I look at answer E. At most 2 voyages to T. Could you make more than 2 voyages to T? Could you make 3 voyages to T? Well, let's see. If I wrote my 7 slots, bring down the T. Of course, you can't have items next to each other. So what if I spaced out the t's? Could I have 3 t's? Maybe put a t first. And how about a t in the middle? Well, with the MGM rule, seems like it might be hard to put a JG in there. But hey, let's move the t to the left. How about this? I put the M here. I put another M out here. And I've got room for my JG in the middle. So yeah, you could have 3 t's. So it's not E. Now, if that didn't jump out at you right away, and it probably didn't, that's fine. You put a tilde by it and come back to it. How about D? Freedom makes at most 2 voyages to J. So you ask, well, could it go to J 3 times? Well, there's a problem. If I did J, G, J, G, J, G 3 times, hey, that's 6 items. And we place the T, that would be the 7th item. What's the problem? We would have no room for the M's. The answer is D. So don't ever dwell on one answer choice. If you think it's a maybe, fine, put a tilde by it and come back to it. All right, let's go back and finish up with that question we passed over. Question 12, we saved this for later because it gave us no details whatsoever. Now, maybe it's easy, maybe it's hard, we don't know, but let's take a look. Which of the following cannot be true? Well, take a second to look at the answer choices. Here we got lucky. It's answer A. That is a deduction we made early on when we combined Rule 2 and Rule 5. You can't have 2 T's next to each other. Answer A. So I hope that was helpful. If it was, be sure to click the like button, subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments section. I will reply. Game 4 is a very different type of game. It's not a sequencing game. It is a grouping game. Very, very different. We'll see it in Game 4.